Hello knitters and friends, welcome to episode 15 of the Seedling Stitch Knitting Podcast. My name is Athena and I am a knitter, an aspiring knitwear designer, and a PhD student in mechanical engineering coming to you from Vancouver, Canada. And this channel is my little corner of the YouTube where I talk everything about knitting and share some of the tips and tricks that I learned along the way. I started knitting 1 year ago in September 2021 and have acquired quite a lot of knitting skills in the past 1 year of time, and some of you have kindly commented me as a fearless knitter, and I really appreciate that title. And by doing this podcast, I'm hoping to share some of my fearlessness with you, hopefully to encourage you to try out some new techniques that you haven't learned before and be a better knitter. So today's episode, I'm very excited about today's episode. I'm going to talk all about my Fir Hat, starting from beginning to finish, including the steeking. And I especially left out this steeking line that we will be doing here in this podcast. And I have some other finished objects and whips of accessories that I'd like to show you. So thank you for taking your time to knit or to relax with me. And without further ado, please grab your knitting or your snacks, your drinks, and let's get started with today's episode. So first of all, I have an announcement about my pattern release. I have released my Qinghua Porcelain Socks on Ravelry. This is a pair of colorwork socks design knitted from toe up with an afterthought heel, and features some colorwork designing that was inspired by the traditional blue and white porcelain from ancient China. This sample socks was knitted for a friend of mine, so I have gifted that away, so I don't have the actual socks to show you, I only have the pictures. I have graded the sock from size M up to size XL, which have a foot circumference from 18 cm up to 25.5 cm, as I remember. The grading was done by changing the needles and gauge, just so that the colorwork chart is the same for every size. So I would like to thank all my test knitters who have knitted these socks beautifully in a short amount of time, and they have selected their own deep blue or fade out blue color and white to create their own porcelain socks. You can check out their version of the porcelain socks on Ravelry as well. And I'm going to give a 20% off on the first 1 week of release until Monday, October the 10th. So please check it out, and if you can, give it a like save the pattern or queue it up so that my pattern may be recommended to more people. And if I haven't said in the introduction before, I grew up and came from China, and this blue and white porcelain is sort of a symbolic thing in my culture, and just by doing these designing, I want to be able to honor my own heritage in some way with my own designing. And you may also see a lot of East Asian cultural content appearing in my podcast here and there. So yeah, I'm thinking giving my podcast a second name, like an East Asian podcast. Anyway, so that's all about the porcelain socks. Be sure to check it out. And my second finished object is the Sophie Scarf, designed by Petite Knit and knitted with the yarn of Sandnes Garn Double Sunday in colorway Statement Green. If you have watched my last episode, I have talked about some of my first sweater design ideas, and I mentioned that I bought some of this double-sided yarn and was trying to do some swatch to see if that will work, but it didn't work, so I ended up with a ball, an orphan ball of this Seedling Stitch yarn. And I just recently, you might have seen the Sophie Scarf a lot. It is like the most trendy knitting pattern on Instagram right now. It's so simple and so quick and easy to make. And I think I only knitted this on the bus and finished it within 1 week. And it is a perfect one skein or one ball project. I used 43 gram of this yarn. It has like 50 gram per ball, and I used 43 gram of it. I have only this much of leftover, and I have also used a few grams to do my swatch, which didn't work for my sweater design. And I'm very happy with the color. And let me just style it for you. And I think it works perfect for this like autumn fall weather. And if I just wear a thicker t-shirt and this, if there's a little breeze, it is perfectly fine. And since this yarn is made from 100% merino, so it is quite soft to the touch and doesn't scratch my neck at all. The original pattern calls for a cashmere yarn. And as a grad student, I am quite poor and I don't have a lot of budget for buying those luxurious yarn. I think my goal of knitting is just to try to clear out all my stash and have no waste. And I'm very happy with my use of this Seedling Stitch yarn to make this Sophie Scarf. And the original pattern used 3.5mm needle, but I found that for this Seedling Stitch for this double-sided yarn, it is I think it is thicker than the cashmere, and if I used 3.5mm needle, the fabric would be kind of stiff. So I used 4mm needle to get this looser, softer fabric, and I like that. So the design is very simple, and I have to confess that I didn't buy the pattern. I sort of hacked the pattern. I think it's okay. I won't tell you exactly what I did so that I won't spoil any pattern, but if you observe how these things are done. So this scarf is basically knitted in the garter stitch with this I-cord edging, and then you shape this triangle by doing some increases on the bottom half and doing some decreases on the top half. And I sort of just look at some notes from the projects on Ravelry. I don't know for the original pattern how many stitches there are, so my version might not be exactly the same as the original version. So I just cast on a few stitches, starting to do the I-cord and then doing some increases every X number of rows, and then until I knitted to here. So I measured how much yarn I left while knitting, and when I knitted to the middle, I measured that I roughly used half of the weight of the yarn. So I started doing decreasing with the same rate, which means I'll be decreasing every X number of rows, being the same X as the bottom, until I have the same amount of yarn, same amount of stitches left as when I cast it on. And just for this little tip, so when at the end I use the Kitchener stitch to connect half of the stitches together, and at the cast on edge I use the mattress stitch to connect the cast on edge together, so that this tip will look very continuous. that's just a little detail. I think it doesn't matter at all. I don't know if there's any special instruction in the original pattern for like the two tips of the triangle. And just based on the public information on Ravelry, there are two versions of this scarf. One is longer and thinner, and the other is shorter. I think my version is 88 centimeters. No, my version is 83 centimeters long. And on the Ravelry, the original pattern, the smaller version is 80 centimeters long. So I think they are approximately the same size. Probably it will feel a bit heavier than the original version with the cashmere, but I think it's okay. And I really like the green color. I think this green color works well with my skin tone. And if you have been a long time a viewer of this channel, you see I probably already have like 50 shades of green done with my past projects. Anyway, that's the Sophie scarf. So the next, let's jump right to the Fir Hat vest. This one. So this pattern is coming from a Japanese knitting book, Fir Hat Knitting, written by Kaze Kobo, also known as Yuko. I will leave the details in the description box below. And this is like my Bible for Fir Hat knitting, and it introduced all the techniques that you need to learn to do Fir Hat. And I'm actually knitting this cover version of the Fir Hat vest. In this book, it also features a lot of other Fir Hat vests, and I am knitting this version. So I think this book has not been translated to English, but I think you can buy the Japanese version. Mine is the Chinese translation. I think you can buy the English version on Etsy just by searching this book name. And I think even if you don't understand the language, you can still be able to use the book, because all these color work charts are printed quite beautifully with the colors and the symbols, and with some translation software you can understand. And most of the stitch numbers, the increase and decrease, are written in schematics. I have a series of tutorial videos teaching you how to rate the schematics in Japanese patterns. So if you are able to just rate the schematics with those numbers, then you can probably use the book. And it also includes a lot of photos to show you how to do some of the Fir Hat techniques. Which, don't worry, I will be showing you all about that today. So I casted on this Fir Hat vest probably back in the spring, but during summer it was quite hot, so I paused it for a while, and also took the sample knitting job of the Fortune sweater before this, and I'm only finishing this one right now. And this is probably the most difficult thing I have ever knitted. And I have learned a lot by doing it. This will be like my capstone knitting project, and I am going to wear this on my PhD defense. And good news, also I have finished writing my thesis, and it is sent for external review right now, and my final dissertation will be scheduled on somewhere in mid-November, which I'm sure I'll be able to finish everything about it, and I'm going to wear this to impress people. Anyway, so this pattern is quite a traditional Fir Hat vest design, and it is knitted from bottom up. And when you knit to about the top shoulder-ish, you will be doing the increasing stitches to prepare for the steeking. And in my last episode, I have showed you my progress with making these extra stitches for to prepare for steeking in the armholes and in the front collar. And since last episode, I have done some steeking. I have cut the collar steeking and cut one armhole steeking, and I have dealt with how to secure the sticking edges, and I will show you all about that today. And apart from that, so I have also done a fix here. So previously, when I was just knitting in the round here, I read the color work chart wrong. So in this line, this like yellow, this yellow-gray color, I misread that to a purple color, and I'll insert a picture of my previous version of the vest here. So I basically had a line of purple just here in this motif. I know people probably wouldn't notice at all, and like some of you have commented that people will just be amazed by the beautiful color work and will pay no attention at all. I totally understand that, but sometimes when I'm not a perfectionist, but when it comes to knitting, and especially for some knitwear that's very, very important to me, I just don't want to have any mistake in it. And basically with that wrong line of purple, it sort of breaks this XO motif, this like XOXO motif. So I still wanted to fix it, and I fixed it by duplicating stitch. So you can probably still see some of the purple underneath, but basically I used the correct color of yarn and thread and to cover over the wrong line of color. So basically this line of fabric is a little bit thicker than the other places, but after I steam blocked it, well, it's still thicker, but it's flat and it's not noticeable at all. I mean, if you did any mistake in your color work, you can fix that by duplicating stitch. I think I've seen a video of a Marie Wallen interview from the Fruity Knitting, and in that episode Marie Wallen had said that when she was designing Pharrell, if she's not happy with one color work design and she wants to just to see how this color work would work with a different color, and she would just do duplicate stitch instead of like trying to knit another sample swatch again. So yeah, I think being able to duplicate stitch is quite useful for doing Pharrell. And other than the fixing mistake, in my last episode, I think I was still knitting in the round to about here, and as I knit it to the top, I need to stitch the front side and the back side together to join here. You can see here this line, that's where I joined the top side to the back side. And the technique that was recommended to this book is by doing the crochet slip stitch, and I will put a short footage of me doing that here as well. So basically I was at the last row of this knitting. I flipped everything to the wrong side and aligned the front side of the work with the back side of the work, and then I will insert my crochet hooks into one stitch in the front needle and another stitch in the back needle, and then do a slip stitch. And so that and then I'll just keep doing this until I worked all of the stitches, and then they will form this nice crochet edge like this. I think this slip stitch is actually equivalent to if you just line these two needles together and you knit one stitch from the front needle and one stitch from the back needle. You knit those two stitches together, and then you knit the next two stitches together, and then you pass the previous stitch over the current stitch as if you are binding off. I think that is equivalent to using the crochet hook in this technique, but it's much faster if you use the crochet hook. I think one thing I found from these Japanese knitting books or technique books is that they don't treat knitting and crochet as two separate crafts. they kind of assume if you are a knitter, you are also a crocheter, and you would know both. And I think that's true for Japanese crafters, but might not be true everywhere. But I think crochet is a really handy skill to learn if you're a knitter, and it will help you improve your knitting skills as well. So after I did that slip stitch, look at my wrong side of the fabric. I think the wrong side looks pretty too. Oh, and by the way, this is where I join the new color of yarn. This is like my beginning and end of the round, where I, like every couple of rows, I would change the yarn colors, and I just weave in the ends as I go when I join new colors, because I hate to have a lot of ends and I have to weave in after I finish everything. So when I change new colors, I always just weave in the end as I go. Like I use the same technique as if I'm carrying the floats. I just leave about 8 stitches before I join the new color of yarn, and I carry the floats every stitch, and then this new color of yarn will be weaved in automatically. And I have trimmed the yarn tips so that you can almost not see anything here. If you touch it, you probably feel like this part is a bit thicker than the other part, but just by looking at it, you don't see anything at all. And looking at the right side of the fabric, you don't see any, yeah, you don't see anything. There's probably like a little jog along the motifs, but that's very normal. That's expected in the traditional Fir Hat design, and nobody would care it. So after that, I steam blocked the whole. I steamed block everything from the wrong side, especially I steamed block the extra stitches where I will be cutting, because I want to make sure that these yarn are slightly felted and stick to each other and won't unravel at all. And I forgot to say about the yarn. And the yarn I used are the recommended yarn and the recommended colors from Jamieson's Shetland Spindrift, and that is like one of the most famous Shetland wool yarn. And it is a really good rustic yarn. And even when I'm knitting without doing any blocking, I can feel that the yarn are sticking to each other quite well. So I didn't worry too much when I'm going to the steeking. The first steeking I did was this V-neck collar. And I have posted a short video here in the channel as well on my Instagram. I will put that short video here as well, and you can listen to the sound of me cutting on the yarn. And the scissor that I used was just a regular IKEA scissor, and I think it is recommended in the book as well as from other experienced Fir Hat knitter that you should use a very sharp crafter made special scissor. But I think the IKEA scissor worked fine for me, so don't stress out if you don't have any super expensive scissor. And it worked for me with just this IKEA scissor. And as you can see from the video, the yarn did not unravel at all. It's super secure. So for this design, for these extra stitches, there are 7 stitches on each side, and in the middle there are two stitches using the same color, and you will be cutting along that line. But in some traditional Fir Hat knitting, they usually just tell you to have 6 stitches or even 5 stitches on each side. But if you feel a little bit worried about the unraveling, you can do as this book's suggestion, where you add 7 stitches on each side. And for me, that's just super secure. I think the unraveling probably just happened for 1 stitch. You can see here, it's the unraveling doesn't happen more than 2 stitches. So you really don't have to worry. If you buy the Shetland yarn or those very rustic woolen yarn, it will be totally fine. So the steeking for the V-neck was really magical. So before you steek, everything was bunched up as a little tube, and after the steeking of the V-neck, this whole garment opened up, and magically this tube looks like an actual garment now. So I really do enjoy that moment and wanted to share that with you. Okay, after the steeking, the next step you do will be to pick up stitches to form this, to knit this rib for the collar. Just according to this book, I used a smaller needle, so I knitted the main body with 3mm needle, and when I'm knitting this collar, I'm using the 2.5mm needle, and I pick up 1 stitch every row. As you can see here with the collar, there are some decreasing, and according to this book, if you are picking up stitch in the place where you did knit 2 stitch together or SSK, you will be picking up the stitch beneath. So like on the place where you do a decrease, you are like there are 2 stitch that you will be like, it will sort of look like this. And when you are picking up stitches, you will insert your needle to the stitch below, like this stitch. I will put a work in progress picture of me just like picking some stitches around the collar. And also there were some stitches just left. I think here on the back of the collar. I just returned those stitches on my needle and knit those stitches, and then I just knit I think 10 rounds of these 2x2 ribbings, and then I will just cast off. And for the cast off, the book also suggested an interesting casting off technique. Actually, I think the result of this casting off method is the same as the casting off method with a knitting needle, where you like knit 2 stitches, pass 1 over, and then you purl 1 stitch, pass 1 over, purl 1 stitch, pass 1 over. The result is the same, but instead of on your right hand, instead of using a knitting needle, you use a crochet hook, and you for the knit stitches, you insert the crochet hook as if you are doing knitting, and then grab the yarn, and then on the second stitch, if it's also a knit stitch, you will use the crochet hook to insert into the stitch on your left needle, grab the yarn, and then you just use the crochet hook to do a slip stitch to drag the first loop on your crochet hook through the second loop on your crochet hook. It is the same step as if it is on a knitting needle and you pass the second stitch over, but with the crochet hook you don't have to operate this thing with the help from your left knitting needle. You can just do this directly with the crochet hook. So that was quite interesting, and it is also slightly faster than doing this with 2 knitting needles. So that's another thing I learned from the book. So you can see the cast off edge. It's not too different. It's exactly the same as if you do a regular bind off with knitting needles. And then I did the steeking for this armhole and pick up stitches in the same way and knitted these ribs. And another technique I want to talk about is how you are gonna secure these crochet edges. So in some traditional Fir Hat knitting, some of them would just left this extra stitches here inside. Nobody would see, and it won't unravel. You can see I'm doing this, and there's nothing wrong happening here. But if you are a perfectionist like me, you would want the edge to look nice even in the wrong side. And to do that, you're going to do some sewing, and it's super easy to do. So according to the book, I have 7 stitches, and the first step I'm gonna do is to trim off 2 stitches and have only 5 stitches left here. I can like trim a few. So this trimming is the same as steeking. It's only like it's less scary because you are trimming off something on the wrong side. So I'll just cut these 2 stitches off. I don't have a table here, so I'll just do a few. So I'll just cut this little thing and throw that in my jar. I have this beautiful jar that I got from a thrift store, and I just throw away, and I just collect all my yarn tips here, and I can use this for my toy stuffings. I make knitted toys as well, and I can use these as stuffings, and they're quite nice. So you can see I trimmed off a little bit here, and I will trim off the rest of the 2 stitches after I finished filming the podcast. I just want to show you what I meant. So now imagine I only have 5 stitches all along these extra stitches. For this step, I'll probably operate in the wrong side as well, so it's easier. Here is the color. I will fold it along the line of the 3rd and the 4th stitch, and then I will grab my sewing needle and a long thread of yarn, and then I will insert this sewing needle into the half stitch of the 3rd stitch and another half stitch of the 4th stitch, like here. Then I will insert into another purl bump in the wrong side of the fabric, like this, and then I will pull the yarn through, and then I will just sewing this every other row. So for every other row, I would insert my sewing needle into the half stitch of the 3rd stitch, half stitch of the 4th stitch, and through one of the purl bumps in the wrong side, and that will secure all this edge like this in the wrong side. And this inner edge will be a little bit thicker, but I think with some blocking this will flatten out, I'm hoping. And even if you accidentally show the wrong side, it looks quite neat as well. Hi there! You have seen I'm changing my setup. I brought back my steaming table, and we are going to do the most exciting part where I will be sticking this armhole. So first I put a stitch marker at the top of the line, and this is the top of and this is the tip of the shoulder, and that's where I should stop my sticking. And I'll be starting from the bottom of the armhole, and I'm gonna stand up and let's cut it. I've done it twice, so on the 3rd time I'm not scared at all. I'll just like cut 4 or 5 rows each time. I put my left hand below the fabric so that I won't accidentally cut on the good part of my fabric. my cat is playing with the cat tree. You can probably hear he's scratching on the tree as well. Okay, I cut it open and I stopped at where I put in the stitch marker. Now I have a garment that finally I can try it on. Before there is no hole, I cannot try it. It's funny. Let me pop this on and finally try it on and see how it looks. Hey, I'm back. Look at this. Look at this beautiful color work. I don't know why these color appears darker than they actually are on the camera. These are really like beautiful summery, no, not summer, they're like beautiful light purple, green, blue, yellow, gray. These are really nice colors, and I think I will just be like this for the rest of the episode. I think I've seen the trend from another podcast where like they just wear a half-finished object like sweater on and forget to take that off for the rest of the episode. I think I'll just do that because this looks so nice and it's almost finished, so I'm just gonna wear it. Regarding the gauge information, the pattern calls for 29 stitches and 31 rows per 10 centimeter square. But I measured mine, and my stitch is about 27.5 to 28 stitches and 32 rows per 10 centimeter square. So that makes my finished garment a little bit larger. So I just see that the armhole is actually small, but this circumference around the bust is probably quite big on me. I have only steam blocked it, I haven't washed it, so I'm hoping I could like stretch it vertically a little bit so that the stitch gauge could be smaller. And also I think probably my stranded color work is looser than the designer's, so maybe next time I will use the 2.75 millimeter instead of a 3 millimeter needle for the main color work. For the yarn colors, I still have a lot of these. Are all the leftover yarn, and I think I can probably make an accompanying like some accessory like a hat or even a scarf out of these colors. And regarding the colorways, I've written them on my knitting journal. If you want, you can just take a screenshot. There's really a lot of colors, and I've written the color names along this line and written the color code and the lot number that I have along this line. And here is how much gram that I have used for each of the color. And here is how much leftover yarn I had, so it's no use for you. You can take a screenshot here, and these are all the information. And if you want to use these colorways to make some other color work for yourself, feel free. I think this designer, Kazakobo, aka Yuko Hata, she's really good at these farrell designs. I have some other Japanese pattern books featuring her designs, whether it's like a farrell cardigan or like a farrell sweater or sometimes socks. She always has the best, most interesting designs. So highly recommend. And I am intending to use the leftover yarn to make this beret hat from the book. Probably not the same colorway as this shown here. I'll just like make my own color combination using what I have. And yeah, I think I could choose similar colorway. These are like blue, green, dark red. I don't have dark red in these. I'll probably replace it with like dark purple. Anyway, it will be fun. Okay, I still have two almost finished whip to show you. This is the hat that I have made. This is my own design. I haven't named it yet. I may be calling it evergreen hat or pine and fir hat, because I'm designing this hat with these cables. This is like a pine tree, and these bubbles are like pine cones. And this also looks like fir tree or another type of pine tree. I'm not a very botanical person. I grew up from the north, from the east north part of China, so there are a lot of evergreen trees in my region. And now I live in Vancouver. There's also a lot of evergreen trees like in this northern area, and I just really like those tall and straight trees and forest. And I also like pine cone. That's why I decided to put this bubble as pine cones here. You may see that it is finished, but I'm not sure I'm happy with how I do this crown decreasing. Let me show you how it looks like. This is how the hat looks like. And from the top, I just think this decreasing might be too sharp. I think now I look at it might be okay. The yarn I used is Host Garn Coast in colorway charcoal, and this is 55% lamb's wool and 45% cotton yarn. I bought 2 cakes of this yarn, and these are the only leftovers. I bought them directly from the website back when I was making my cardigan number 8. These are all made with Host Garn yarns. You can look at the details of this garment in my episode 2 and 3. And they have like a flat rate shaping for, I think, yarn below 800 gram or something. And I want to use the full potential of this like shaping. So I just like added enough weight of yarn so that if I add a little bit extra, they will like upgrade the shaping rate. So I just added 2 little cakes of this coast yarn. And back then I was thinking of making a hat for my husband, since I haven't knitted him anything yet. I've only been knitting stuff for myself or some of my girlfriends. And my husband, he has very sensitive skin. He doesn't accept any sort of like a scratchy rustic woolen yarn. So I decided to try this coast because it is made with cotton and lamb's wool, so it is very soft to the touch. And I've only had the time to tackle this hat knitting now, and now that I'm trying to design a lot of things, I just think, why don't I design this hat by myself instead of following some other patterns, just so that I can save some money on buying patterns and maybe also earning some money by making designs to make my like knitting hobby more sustainable. This hat is a cable design with a folded brim, and I see a lot of like design with folded brim, and they usually just is a 2x2 rib or a 1x1 rib. But I want my design to have just a little bit detail, so I added this cable to match the cable that's separating some of the other motifs on the main part of the hat. So you can see this this is a 4-stitch smaller cable. This small cable runs from the brim until the tip of the hat. For this hat, the pattern is repeated 4 times every round. One round there will be 4 of these pine trees and 4 of these like fir trees, and these bigger trees are separated by these smaller cables, and I think that looks quite pretty. So I was holding 3 strands of this horse garn yarn together and used 2 cakes. So I used 100 grams of that, and I just have this much, and I weighed is only 1 gram left. I'm not sure if I want to keep this crown shaping. I might want to extend it to make it longer, but I only have 1 gram, so even if I extend it, I probably wouldn't be able to extend it too much. So let me know what you think about this crown shaping. And I think a good thing about this cable design is that they are super stretchy. This hat is, I think I measured, the circumference was 48 centimeters, and I could wear it, and I have a 55 to 56 centimeter hat circumference, and it fits me well. And I let my husband try it yesterday, and he had the bigger hat. His hat had a circumference of 60 or 59.5 centimeter ish, and he can wear it no problem. He doesn't feel it's too tight. He said yeah, like one motivation for me knitting him a hat is that a lot of commercial hats you could buy are too tight for his head. So I want to knit something that fits him as well as I can wear it. So when I am wearing it, there is like a little space on my head, and when he wears it, it sort of just wraps around his head nicely. And also he asked for a hat with this brim, because he said those hat without a brim and just covers his head, and he said makes his head looks like a potato. Anyway, and yeah, and I do like brims on a hat because it's warmer. And for the technical part, this is just casting on from the bottom, and by the way, I used the German twisted cast on, which makes it super stretchy. So I used the German twisted cast on and knit in the round, and these cables on the brim are just done on the round side, so you don't have to do any like flipping when you start to knit the main part of the hat. So everything just knitted in the round as well. You are doing some kiveling. For the tree motif, that is 2x1 cable, and in the middle of the tree there are some sand stitch to make some textures. This bubble is a 3-stitch 5 rows bubble. I will make a video for this when I'm making the pattern. And for this like fir tree cable, this is the larger cable. This is like a 4 stitches over 2 stitches cable to form these. At the crown shaping, just some of the decreasing were merged into where it should be the cabling. Yeah, that's pretty much the technical part of the design. I just recently found that it's really easy to do the designs on these graph paper, like grid paper, instead of doing that in the app. Previously, I had this knitting chart app on my iPhone and iPad where I can draw the chart in an app. But I think it's just much easier to use a piece of paper with this grid and pencil and eraser, so that I can like change things very fast, and also like I can keep notes on how many stitches I have increased, and tips if you want to be a designer or try to work out some simple modification for your own knitting. But the challenge will be how can I make this chart into like a printable pattern. I think in the knitting chart app that I have, it probably cannot make these charts with shaping and decreasing. I'll still have to figure that part out. And I will also be making a written part of this cable chart. I think it's nice to offer a written cable chart as well as a graphical cable chart, so that you can compare the two and probably give people with fewer cabling experiences more confidence using this pattern. Also, I will probably finish writing this pattern in a couple weeks, and if you are interested in test knitting this hat pattern, just stay tuned or make a comment below. Let me know so that I can make sure you get a notification when I'm making a test haul. I will make like a post here in YouTube as well as on my Instagram. My Instagram is sd_Athena. I actually think that this hat will look much prettier if it is done in a whiter, like a natural white or like almond lighter color. It will like show these cables much better. Oh, and by the way, I used 3.5mm needle for the brim and 4mm needle for the main part. And I'm holding 3 strands of the host garn yarn together, so that probably equals to like a worsted weight. And I think it will be possible to knit this in like a DK plus lace weight. Like you can hold a DK yarn like this double sanding yarn with another strand of like silk mohair. And I think that will look really great, but I just don't have the yarn to do that. So if you have like some yarn in your stash and you would like to test knit this, stay tuned and comment and let me know. And thank you for that. Well, that's everything about my to be named, probably named evergreen hat. And the other whip I have is just another sock. In my background you can see those are my kiwi fruit socks, and I'm making another pair for my husband, and I'm using the same pattern as my own no frills toe up socks pattern. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. In my last episode I used 40 grams of this flat sock yarn with the kiwi fruit colorway. This is just a self-patterning yarn. I used 40 grams for my own sock, and I have 60 grams left, and I'm making my husband a pair. And it's nice that this sock yarn is made with cotton, so it won't be scratchy for him. He had very high standard for what yarn I could use. That's why I don't like knitting stuff for him. And I'm almost finished. I made some modification. I think I used the 64 stitches version in my pattern, and for the gusset increase I knitted 2 extra rounds, so I increased for an extra time because as I try these on him I feel like I have to do that. And for the heel I used a different heel. The pattern that I had was a slip stitch heel, and here I used a staggered slip stitch. So basically on the first row of right side you slip knit, and on the second row on the wrong side you purl. On the third row of the right side you knit slip and knit slip one, so you like stagger your slip stitches, and it will form this like lattice sort of texture, and I think that's kind of neat. So I'll just be finishing it off to do the cuff. On the main part it was 2.5mm needle, and on the cuff I'm switching it to 2mm needle because as I tried on him his ankle is much thinner, so I reduced the needle size. I could probably do some decrease on the stitches as well I'll just try this on and see how it goes. So that's all the knitting projects that I have to show you. And I don't have any yarn acquisitions because I really want to finish knitting off my stashes. For the future plans, I'm going to knit the Lulu Little Bunny designed by Ekaterina Popova. I have started out this animal friend knit along on Ravelry as well as on Instagram. I'll put the link in below, and a lot of you have already finished a lot of knitted animals, and my knitted animals, I have put them back there. I reorganized my living room. I bought an IKEA shelf there so that I can put my knitting books and stashes. All my stashes, you can see all my stash fit in those two bottom cells. And my knitting book fit in one cell, and another cell was my husband's book, and another cell is my own like graphed storybook, and another cell is my encyclopedia. I'm pretty happy with my new knitting corner. What was I saying? Oh, back to Lulu Little Bunny. I've started this animal knit along, and I've promised in this channel that in October I'm going to knit one animal, and I'm going to knit the Lulu Little Bunny. I also want to make the Fir beret hat with my leftover yarn. I also have some plans for knitting a slip over and a sweater. I have another Fir vest that I want to knit. And I also want to design my first sweater. Oh, and I forgot to say, I'm thinking of designing a sweater with similar stitch patterns on like a round yoke sweater with these like pine tree with pine cone sort of cabling growing from here, and also these bigger birch tree cables that runs all over the yoke, and also there will be like a cable that runs through the sleeve. That's my idea, so I'm just like playing this idea with this little design of the hat until I feel ready for designing my sweater. So I'm still waiting for the yarn to come, and then I could try out my first sweater design as well. Maybe I will make like a knitting plan for the winter and fall sort of video in my next episode. And I think after the release of this video, I will be very close to having 1,000 subscribers. I'm super thrilled for that, and really thank you for your support. I'm still waiting for my giveaway gift to arrive. I have some special Chinese yarn and knitting books that I want to give you as giveaway. I didn't anticipate that I will reach 1K this fast, so stay tuned. So I think that will be all for this episode. Thank you for staying here with me for another hour of relaxing knitting chatty time. And please like this video if you like it, and make some comment letting me know what you're knitting while watching this, and let me know if you have some Fir project that you intend to do or have done, or like Fir pattern recommendation. And I think the Fir techniques that I talked about in this episode might not be universal. I've seen people doing the steeking or fixing the steeking line in other ways, and if you know some other like technical things, feel free. This whole channel is like me geeking out on some knitting technique for 60 minutes, so feel free to be geeky about knitting techniques here. And if you haven't, please subscribe and recommend my channel to your friends if possible, so that I can beat the YouTube algorithm and meet more knitters around the world. If some of the tips and tricks I talk in this episode were helpful for you, please consider supporting me on Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/Seedling Stitch. You can buy me a coffee for one time or buy me a coffee every month. Just so that I feel a bit more financially supported to do this video. I'm on Ravelry as Athena Liu and Instagram as SD_Athena. You can check out all my knitting projects and knitting notes on Ravelry as well as on Instagram. So normally at the end of this episode, I would play a piece of piano for you. But today, since I'm reorganizing my knitting corner, my piano corner is a bit messy, so I will just insert an audio also of me playing piano, but from my previous episodes. And I will also insert some footage of my hiking. We went to the Seymour River Suspension Bridge and the Lynn Canyon Park Suspension Bridge. We basically went to 2 suspension bridges at one time. There were a lot of evergreen trees in this hike. It was a very easy hike in North Vancouver. I did some knitting along the Seymour River. I was knitting the Kiwi Socks for my husband. Yeah, enjoy the footage and happy knitting. Take care of yourself. See you next time. Bye. Going to give out a 20% off for the first 2 weeks of socks.